Hello, everyone. Happy Friday. On behalf of the Nasdaq Entrepreneurial Center, I want to extend a warm welcome to all of our attendees. We're thrilled to have you here. I'm Jessica, and I work with the Nasdaq Entrepreneurial Center and focus on our research on how we collectively build inclusive entrepreneurial ecosystems. We call this work the Venture Equity Project. And today's event is the second in a series of virtual events that we are hosting to share insights from leaders across US ecosystems to spread good ideas that are supporting entrepreneurs of all backgrounds. I'd like to ask our other speakers to come on camera. Thank you. So today we are focused on Texas. And we have three outstanding speakers from Texas who will share their work. And I'd like to quickly ask each of you to just share your name, title, and where you're located. And then I'll share a bit more about our research and then hand it over to our moderator, Sima.
Absolutely. My name is Sima Ladjevardian. I have the honor of being the chair of the National Women's Business Council, and I'm a proud Texan.
Hey everyone, I'm Arjita Sethi. I'm the founder of New Founders School. I just moved to Austin, Texas this year.
Hello everyone, my name is Beto Pallares. I live in El Paso, Texas. I am the founder of Audaz Capital. I was born in Mexico, but like we like to say in Texas, born elsewhere, but got here as soon as we could.
Wonderful, thank you. Well, I'd like to share a bit of background about why our conversation today is focused on Texas. So one of the big efforts we have here at the Nasdaq Entrepreneurial Center is called the Venture Equity Project. And we research the factors that make an inclusive entrepreneurial ecosystem. What are the public policies, the programs, the initiatives that help underrepresented entrepreneurs bring forward their business into the world? I'd like to express our deep gratitude to our partners in this work, JPMorgan Chase and Nasdaq, for supporting the Venture Equity Project, a multi-year initiative focused on addressing inequities in entrepreneurship. We know that entrepreneurship drives economic opportunity and innovation. We also know that these opportunities are not equally accessible to everyone. So our work with the Venture Equity Project is designed to research how we change that. Our recent report that we published in October, called Revitalizing Innovation, starts to make a case for how to measure and understand the pathways to building inclusive entrepreneurial ecosystems. We worked in partnership with Heartland Forward and Penn State University to evaluate which places in the US are successfully supporting underrepresented entrepreneurs. And in this research, 7 states stood out: Florida, Georgia, Illinois, Maryland, Michigan, North Carolina, and Texas. These states all share core characteristics that make them fertile ground for inclusive entrepreneurship. They have strong venture capital activity, and they have higher than average numbers of businesses started and led by Black, Hispanic, and women entrepreneurs. We also see very strong public-private partnerships in these states that are leading to outstanding outcomes for underrepresented entrepreneurs. So we are running a series of events. This is our second event in the series that will provide different lenses from practitioners who are leading this work in their states. So today we have Sima, Beto, and Arjita joining us to share with you some of the work that they are leading in each of their ecosystems. And I'm really excited because Texas is a very diverse state, and we have 3 very different perspectives, Beto being in El Paso, Arjita in Austin, and Sima in Houston. So you'll get to hear a kaleidoscopic view of what's happening in Texas. We will reserve the last 15 minutes for your questions. We love your questions. We invite the questions as they come up for you. Please put them in the chat, and we'll try to answer as many as we can in the last 15 minutes of our presentation. So Sima, I'd like to hand it over to you for the conversation.
Thank you so much, Jessica. So excited to be here with Arjita and Beto. I wanted to tell you a little bit about the National Women's Business Council, which is an independent federal advisory council that came into existence in 1988 with the enactment of the Women Business Ownership Act. Just 36 years ago, women could not get business loans without a male co-signer. So that act took that away and also established women business centers. And we have about 160 of them in the US right now, helping women, do anything they need to pretty much start their own businesses. Our job is to give advice and counsel to the president, to Congress, and the SBA about anything to do with women entrepreneurs. And we come up with a policy recommendation at the end of each year that has really been put together because of all the conversations that we have and our incredible council members who are leaders of women national organizations and women business owners themselves of both parties. We are the only advisory council that represents the 14 million women business owners in the US. I'm just so excited to be here and excited to moderate this. So we're just going to jump into this, and I guess going to Arjita and Beto, you each bring such unique perspective on entrepreneurship in Texas. Would you share your background, what drew you to support founders in your respective communities, and just say a little bit more about yourselves?
Sure. Oh, go for it, Beto.
I'll only do it because I'm senior to you in terms of tenure in Texas. Well, I'm based in El Paso, Texas, and I've been very fortunate for the last nearly 20 years. I've been working in venture, deploying capital both to funds as well as directs. And geographically, El Paso is relatively isolated, if you will. We're closer to LA than we are to Houston. We're closer to the capital of New Mexico than we are to the capital of Texas. So El Paso has a strong history of manufacturing and logistics, not so much a history in tech development. So when I started in venture, a lot of my investments were outside of the region, outside of El Paso. And it came about, given my background in academia, I hold a PhD in strategy and background in various other industries. It came about that, I was spending a lot of time outside of El Paso. And one time I got a LinkedIn invitation from a young man in California, in San Francisco, and said, I'd like to meet with you. I happen to be from El Paso. So I met with him, and he had tech ideas. He was doing great. I said, why aren't you doing this in El Paso? He says, well, there isn't an ecosystem. And I met someone in New York, same situation. I met someone in Dallas, same situation. And then I met people in El Paso at a Starbucks. And I said, well, why aren't you going to some sort of place where you could work on this? He says, well, there is no such place. So we took it upon ourselves to gather support from the community, and we started the first co-working space in El Paso. And that became the detonating component, if you will, for others to get involved and feel comfortable with technology. And so that was sort of the origins of how we started, and thought, it's our responsibility and privilege to bring what we're learning elsewhere and cross-fertilize with the talent that exists in this part of the state.
Thank you so much, Beto. Arjita?
Yeah, thanks, Sima. Thanks, Beto. That is so fascinating. I see very similar threads in my journey as well. I'm originally from India. I became an entrepreneur at 16. I started my first company at 16 in India. It was a vocational school, ran that for 7 years, reached about 100,000 people, worked with the United Nations and local schools and national schools there. And I realized at the time Silicon Valley was booming with tech, and I'd heard the Steve Jobs quintessential speech. And I was like, how is this person able to reach 1 million people? Why am I stuck with 100,000? Why can I not go beyond that? So basically started thinking about startup ideas that could scale, and then moved to Silicon Valley. Interesting turn of events. I'll probably cover that, Sima and Beto, with you some other time. I was talking about that with Jessica yesterday, but moved to Silicon Valley, did my master's in social entrepreneurship, and moved to Silicon Valley with one idea: can we build companies that can hit scale and impact at the same time? Worked on my first startup, went through a ton of immigration issues, didn't realize that was such a hard thing, but eventually figured all of it out and built my first edtech AI startup. We were essentially trying to build ChatGPT for kids back in 2017, 2019. It wasn't possible. Technology hadn't caught up. We did our venture round, everything, and then we had to shut the company because it just wasn't feasible at that time, maybe today. So in 2019, when I had shut my first startup, I was very burnt out. And I started talking to other entrepreneurs, and everybody said entrepreneurship is hard. But it was very hard for me. And I realized it was harder for me because I was an unconventional founder. I was having no family around me where I was trying to build. There was nobody around me who was teaching me what entrepreneurship was. I was first in my family to move across the world to start a company, to start a business. And there was no awareness of, where to begin, what are the resources? I have an idea. Can this even become a business? So I realized that entrepreneurship is hard, but it is harder for unconventional people who are probably the first ones in their family or around them to even think about entrepreneurship. So started New Founders School with an aim to go ahead and support unconventional entrepreneurs as much as possible. In the last 3 years, officially we started in 2021. In the last 3 years, we've served over 1,000 entrepreneurs through programs, through helping them launch their companies' ideas, get them funds. And then after living for a decade in Silicon Valley, I saw that Austin was booming with startup ideas in tech. I had been to South by as an entrepreneur, and I serve as the official business coach at South by for their startups. So I was thinking, why not just move here and explore? So this year in March, moved here. And honestly, the vibrancy of ideas is so beautiful. I was talking about this a little bit earlier, where I could find an entrepreneur working in construction, in real estate, a creator, an artist, an AI startup founder, all within one space. And that doesn't happen much. The way blockchain and crypto and gaming is booming in Austin, it blew my mind. It kind of reminded me of the time when I moved to San Francisco in 2013, 2014. And I think that's where Austin is, and Texas at large. Quite a few of our entrepreneurs and successful entrepreneurs, their case studies have been in Texas. They've been in Texas. They've started companies in Texas. So my aim essentially now is how to serve this ecosystem that is so nascent and new, but also so vibrant and diverse.
I just love that. I think we all share the same type of history. I also came here as an immigrant and knew nothing about how to start anything. Started my own law firm, and I was lucky to have my family around me, and then did a lot of family business, but also not reaching out to what resources were available, just relying on ourselves because we didn't know what else is available. But Texas is incredible. It's very, very diverse, and there is an incredible growth of underrepresented entrepreneurs that need access to those resources. So the fact that you've come here to do that, I love it. I think it's fantastic. You touched on your school, your founder school right now, and you've developed a model supporting immigrant and unconventional founders. How does this approach align with Texas's entrepreneurial landscape in your view?
The three of us in this panel today, all are immigrants, so 100% there. So imagine if New Founders School existed when we had moved here and we were starting out our entrepreneurial dreams. But in terms of unconventional entrepreneurs, I realized that a lot of entrepreneurs, they are the first ones, especially in Texas, they're the first ones to think about pursuing entrepreneurship. And not just conventional full-time entrepreneurship. I'm seeing a lot of small businesses come up. I'm seeing a lot of people wanting to monetize their podcast. They want to go ahead and start a side hustle of a clothing company or a chai company that they want to do. They love their job. The diversity of such founders is beautiful. And the fact is, the old blueprint of running the startup of, putting all in, working out of a garage, hustling will not work for such entrepreneurs. There is a newer blueprint that these founders need. They need to understand that there's something called, and we call this at New Founder School as a life synced business. That your life is going to happen. You have to manage that while building a business. So how do you go about that? And it is different for each entrepreneur. Just last year this year, we're still in December. I'm already in 2025, but just this year at South by, like I said, I was able to coach an entrepreneur building immersive technology for construction companies because this person had been an architect all their life. And they didn't see that solution. They're not even an engineer. I see an entrepreneur go ahead and start investing in real estate because that's what they want to build. They want to build a real estate empire. And at the same time, I saw a podcaster going ahead and saying, how do I monetize my course? How do I go ahead, give? And my mind blew because the same advice won't work for each one of them. So I think that's the beauty that I'm really witnessing, and I'm here for it.
We did a study, NWDC did a study for underrepresented communities, and we focused more on what is common and commonly missing, I guess, that we could be helpful with. And we divided it into, access to funding and resources, because most people in this category rely on personal saving. We really push on childcare access and improving transportation and broadband infrastructure. Then our second one was the need for networking and mentoring, to really tailor it to these groups that you're talking about, because everybody's so different, and also make sure we have subsidized mentorship and really building, promoting the programs that are out there and building trust, because that's something that's not out there. So I think you're in the right place at the right time, and I love that. Beto, El Paso has its own unique innovation ecosystem. Could you share how border region innovation hubs are developing and what distinct opportunities they represent?
Absolutely. As mentioned earlier, El Paso is known for logistics, being on the border. It also has a strong background in manufacturing. It used to be the jean capital of the world. It is still the cowboy boot capital of the world. If you ever want really nice custom-made boots or run-of-the-mill boots, you can find them here. But the pockets of entrepreneurship that are very, very prevalent are very comfortable with extreme, or sometimes not as extreme, changes. They're very, very geographically proximate. Pricing is different if you walk 800 meters that way. Product availability is different. But the spirit of entrepreneurship permeates the entire region across the border, and I include southern New Mexico as well. You also have strong familial ties here that go cross-border from Mexico to Texas and New Mexico as well. What that creates is essentially a level of comfort and understanding, a sort of bilingualism and biculturalism that's very unique. It also allows for people to quickly understand the complexities of marketing in a new environment. Going to the specific areas that are prevalent and important, like manufacturing, logistics, and I'd even say financial services and healthcare, are pretty unique in this area of the world. For instance, you have 400 plus medical devices made right across the border, but they're all FDA approved. You've also have a lot of permeability on labor force, where you have people from El Paso traveling and working in Ciudad Juarez and vice versa. And so those economies are highly, highly linked. So we've always thought of them as what we call a borderplex. As far as a talent base, you have lots of great engineering and software development talent. You have lots of great managerial talent, and you have access to capital. So there is no absence of capital or absence of good ideas. What is a challenge for us and what we're working to address is the ability of people to go from idea and capital to product development. Once the product is developed, we are going to have people that know how to manage companies because there's a long history of that. But the product development challenge is real, and it's real across many, many other economies. So that's where we're trying to link our entrepreneurs with more experienced product development managers from Silicon Valley or other areas based on the industry that they're working on, right? The other area that I'll mention that I'm particularly excited about is logistics and fintech, right? Because there's so much going on cross-border. Those things will continue to evolve. And what El Paso or the region represents is both a marketplace for talent and a marketplace for customers. What we're working on is to create a marketplace for entrepreneurs to leverage what's already existing here and build something successful from that.
I love the borderplex. I think it's fantastic that there's such a back and forth movement of talent, ideas, information, and the fact that you have easy access to capital. That's not an easy feat on any level, especially on the women's side. So would love to have more conversation later about, sharing best practices on that. This one is for both of you. How do you think can different regions support models within Texas learn from and complement each other? And I guess part of it is our research has also shown that there is significant variations in business ownership depending on the geography and the various ecosystems. And what we have seen is that the strength of business, personal networking, supply of cost of key supports, childcare, broadband, like there's a lot of issues that come in. So I'd love to know both your views on that. Arjita, I'll let you start.
That is such an interesting topic. I think, Sima, we can have just a panel discussion on that. I'm a new mom. I have a 4-month-old. And I truly understand when, before this, I used to say entrepreneurship is hard. And I'm like, really? I thought that was hard. Now being a new mom and an entrepreneur, I'm like, wow, perspective is very different. But what I'm really seeing, and I'm not, again, I'm very new to Austin. I know more about the Silicon Valley ecosystem, but what I'm noticing here, which I didn't see that much, is the movement of entrepreneurs. People don't have problem coming from Dallas to Austin for a networking event, which was unheard of. The amount of distance that entrepreneurs are ready to travel. They're ready to go make a day trip to Houston to connect with an investor, pitch them, and come back into. This is phenomenal. And this is what I talk about unconventional entrepreneurship, where in San Francisco, we were trying to build the entire ecosystem within those 7x7 miles. Entrepreneurs don't mind traveling that distance if there is access to that resource or mentorship or coaching. There are multiple accelerator programs that are being run, like Founder Institute and Capital Factory here in Austin. But then there are multiple organizations in Dallas that are helping entrepreneurs and small business owners. So I've just realized that the spirit of entrepreneurship is very open. Where is the resource? We'll go there instead of I'm going to wait for things to happen in my ecosystem. And that is such an amazing spirit of entrepreneurship that I truly want to celebrate. But at the same time, affordability is something that you talked about. And I think that has been one of the goals that I am moving towards at New Founder School as well. Our goal for over the next 2 years is how can we serve at least 100 entrepreneurs and not charge them any fee for the programs? Just go ahead, come launch your company. That is one. And the second is how can we give them enough time? I think entrepreneurship and what Beto was talking about, you get to an idea, you have to develop the product, get the product management because you need to grow that product. This life cycle doesn't take 3 months, and accelerator programs are 3 months. It takes 2 years. And we really need to be holding the hand of an entrepreneur for those 2 years. What do you need? You need money, you need mentorship, you need access to space, talent. We need to be there. So I think understanding that we need to go fast, but we need to be also slow and intentional about how we serve our entrepreneurs. So I think those are a few things that I think New Founder School can bring and what I have noticed in this ecosystem as well.
And you're very right, considering how big Texas is, people are willing to travel, which is fantastic to see. Beto?
Well, two comments. The first is going back to a previous comment about access to capital. There is capital in El Paso. There isn't always an understanding of tech businesses so that people can jump in and support. And that's part to work on. The other aspect related to travel within Texas, I often get, or not so much anymore, I get the occasional email or text saying, hey, I'm going to be in Dallas. You want to meet up for lunch? Well, that's a 10-hour drive for me, or a flight, hour and a half flight. So some exceptions, it's more challenging to be as mobile, right? Without some planning. But to kind of dive into support structures and differences and things of that nature that are important in my region of the state. People here don't have a problem asking for help. The challenge is that you don't always know what you're asking help for, right? So I like to say that people, kids, students, professionals will rise to the level of expectations of what they've been exposed to. And so for us in sort of a remote place, if you will, we need greater and deeper exposure to models that work, to entrepreneurs to mimic, and to resources that we can understand how to apply. And that only comes when you cross-fertilize, you visit, you travel, you do things of that nature that really expose you and say, aha, this is possible. I like to say that there's a big difference between uncertainty and risk. Now, as immigrants, I see this daily because of living on the border, you have a certain sense of understanding uncertainty, right? Because it's uncertain sometimes when you're moving cross country or various countries. So uncertainty is not really measurable, but you have sort of a probabilistic model of how you think about it. Risk, however, is measurable. And I used to believe that you could not teach entrepreneurship. You had to be born with it. And the reality is that the answer is both. You need to be exposed to entrepreneurship and behavioral models to mimic, hence having good mentors, hence cross-pollinating, going out to other places. But you also need something inside of you, that exposure that gives you the comfort to take the risk. It's not the same to understand what the risk is of something and actually want to engage with that risk. So entrepreneurs, really good entrepreneurs, go out of the way to learn what that risk is, and then they draw from either the cultural background, lived experiences, network of mentors and the like to say, I'm willing to take this risk. And I think in Texas, whether it's a small traditional business or tech, you have a high index of people that are saying, I'm entrepreneurial, and they're getting it right. They're working to understand, and they're engaging with that risk. I think outside forces, sources of capital, large companies would make a good bet on Texas because you have that entrepreneurial spirit. What we need further in is really the ability to dominate markets that then, make Texas or parts of Texas a net importer of wealth versus a net exporter of talent or products, right? Or products being, people that have to move to work elsewhere and the like. So in the context of Texas, it's so rich. You have energy and healthcare in Houston. You have education, tech, products of various types, food industry, and the like in Austin. You have agriculture, manufacturing, and oil and gas and other things in West Texas. And then South Texas, you have other areas. So it's an extremely rich environment that really becomes a very welcoming environment across a broad panoply of entrepreneurship and different sectors that people can engage in. So it behooves, whether you're an entrepreneur already in Texas or wanting to engage with Texas, to understand the various assets and attributes of each part of the state, regardless of its, geographic endowment, mountains or hills or desert or what have you. You have to understand what it has to offer long-term for that industry per se.
I love what you said about, in your area, there people are not afraid to ask. It's just what to ask. Well, we've seen a lot in our research, especially with women and underrepresented women, is some sort of a trust level as to who to ask. And, all the resources that are available. And part of our policy recommendation is to make sure that the federal government spends money in micro targeting these communities, so they are aware of what is available and they can go to the Women Business Center in their area or the SBA in their area or whatever other organizations or all the various resources that are there. And it's just great. I love to see, and I agree with you 100% about the spirit of entrepreneurship in Texas. We're going to move now to our next section, and our research shows varying levels of entrepreneurial equity across Texas. Arjita, based on your experience working with immigrant founders, what are the key barriers and opportunities you've identified?
I think the biggest barrier right now are the visa issues that a lot of people have to navigate. And had I not gone through it, I wouldn't have understood it. It's too nuanced to understand the struggle there, because there are certain limitations on when and how you can be an entrepreneur. I came to the US to be an entrepreneur. That was my focus of my study as well. That is what I had moved here to do. And so I think that is the number one concern. How do we empower more immigrants to go ahead and build businesses and develop the economy and bring jobs and create that sort of entrepreneurial ecosystem here as well, because they do have unique ideas and they come from very, very unique storylines. So that is number one. But the second thing is network. Most of the immigrants or unconventional entrepreneurs, when they go out, their usual network is probably somebody who's doing a job or who is in their own line of practice. They've not even had a conversation about what entrepreneurship is. I remember the first time I moved here, most of my friends around were all working in big tech companies, software engineering. And when I said I wanted to be an entrepreneur, they said, why can't you just do a job? Why do you have to do this? What's the point of this? And I did not have a group of people who I could just sit and brainstorm ideas with. Eventually I did find, and it was harder. So I think the second is the network. Even if you say, I'll figure out my visa situation, I'll get a good immigration attorney, this is an idea, it's worth building. How do you even have that support extrinsically around you? What Beto talked about, the risk and that appetite of taking risk. My dad served in the Indian Army for 22 years, 23 years, and he had told me and taught me tolerance for ambiguity. And I am great with it. Like, I am okay not knowing what's going to happen because I will figure it out. But the thing is, when you don't even know what to do when something unknown happens and you're all by yourself. I remember when we were struggling for funding, the problem was not that we were struggling for funding. The problem was that I did not have anybody to share that with. Hey, I'm struggling for funding. What do I do? And it was very easy for people to say, get a family and friends round. For my family, $5,000 is a lot of money. They are in India. It's not a small amount of money. So I think that is something that is truly important. The second thing I think is supporting somebody mentally and emotionally, and that can be done through coaching. It is so valuable to be with somebody and guide them, just like an athlete needs that. I think every entrepreneur needs that as well. They are going to be tackling a lot of issues. And even with your co-founders, employees, you cannot discuss your insecurities. And if something's going wrong, you need that. And finally, access to talent. A lot of the times, people are not able to find co-founders or their first engineers, or they're not able to find somebody to go in and help them build processes and systems, or help them with marketing, building their website. Things like that should be easily available for entrepreneurs to at least go and test out their idea, see if it can become something, and then eventually, of course, funding and how to raise funds. But those would be the few points that I think a lot of unconventional and immigrant entrepreneurs struggle with. At New Founder School, this is where I want to keep supporting and helping entrepreneurs. And that's where we start. We start with, you have an idea, come, let's validate it. It is
Absolutely.
a validated idea. Then let's go build the prototype. Great. You did interviews. Prototype is great. You got a proof of concept. Let's build a proof of a business. Now let's build your ops systems and processes. See, it's a replicable model. Let's build your growth model. So I think that is what is needed. And the great part about being an entrepreneur is they generally don't build one business. Once they've learned this, they'll keep building it and passing it on. We love to teach. That's what we all entrepreneurs do. You want to give it back. So I think that would be the life cycle that I generally think is a barrier, but also can be a way for us to support. It's an opportunity for all of us in this room to support entrepreneurs with.
A lot of what you're saying is what our research and our various outreaches have also told us based on what we've done. And one of the things we've realized is access to capital when starting. Like, a lot of immigrants or underrepresented community don't go to banks to loan money because they try to get family to put in money. They put the house on the as a backup loan, and that becomes very difficult. Our data, like on women's side, is crazy. Women-owned businesses are a driving force in the US economy, account about 39.1% of all the enterprises and employ 13 million people.
Wow.
And right now, give to the economy 3.3 trillion annual revenues.
Wow.
If all else were being equal and the same things were provided, they would add 10.2 trillion to the economy, which is just a staggering number. We can talk about this forever. Beto, with El Paso's 82% Hispanic population, what insight can you share about supporting Hispanic entrepreneurs in the border region?
Yeah, so certainly being Latino is the norm here versus the anomaly in perhaps in other parts of the country. So that often gets overlooked as an attribute that is positive or an advantage, if you will, when you're an entrepreneur, because there's a lot that entails. For a number of years, pre and through the pandemic, Latinos accounted for 50% of every new business created in the country and 50% of every new home purchases in the country, right? And that's because it's as a population or as a group, it's the largest part, the fastest growing part of the middle class. And as the middle class goes, so does the rest of the country, right? So it's an important component from that perspective. In El Paso, where we're predominantly Latino, we sometimes forget that that's an attribute that's particularly important, right? So, to kind of think about El Paso or our region and its predominant Latino population means that we also have to think about what are some of these stereotypes that are important to address. Sort of as Arjita mentioned, $5,000 is a lot of money here too,
Yeah.
right? For an entrepreneur, if they're an immigrant or what have you. So, I've been doing funding of startups for a number of years, and because when I started, I was one of the few Latinos that was involved, could write a check at a venture fund or at a family office. Consequently, I got a disproportionate amount of deals sent to me that were Latinos. And then those same deals that were being sent to me over the years, they had the academic pedigree, they had the work experience, but they still lacked the social capital access to that first check, right? So, and that persisted countrywide. So we took it upon ourselves to be more active and proactive in seeking out Latinos who are seeking funding. So to date, across all the capital that I've managed, which comes close to 200 million, a third of all the Latinos, a third of all the entrepreneurs we've backed, and a third of all the capital we've deployed has been behind Latino men and women. And that's because it was a product of my network. However, what's interesting is that I didn't write a check in El Paso until many years later. Why? Because at the end of the day, you have to hold a standard of performance, if you will, on a global standard. So as the level of understanding and comfort with tech companies in El Paso increased, we had more entrepreneurs rise and say, okay, now I'm comfortable accessing risk capital. Now I'm comfortable, moving from sort of doing it on my own to engaging with an outside partner, capital partner, to do this in a successful way. And that's super important because, as I mentioned, at least in my region, people are comfortable with risk, but they're comfortable with risk. If they fail, then they'll do it again, or maybe not. But, because they don't understand the full array of resources available to them, they might make decisions that are, somewhat compromised in terms of their ability to succeed financially. And I'll give you an example. The Latino Business Action Network, which has a strategic relationship with Stanford University, they put out an annual research report on the state of Latino entrepreneurship. Okay, it's called SOL. They do it every year. It's a Stanford-led research. And what that research found is that predominantly traditional Latino entrepreneurs are leveraging their home equity, right? Second mortgage on their home to finance their entrepreneurial endeavors. And you want to talk about the most risky thing you can do as an entrepreneur, put your primary home at risk. Then the pandemic hits, right? And now you have people who don't have a business because they got shut down. And now their primary home is in jeopardy because that's how they finance their business, because the road to get financing was so difficult or constrained from that perspective. And so we just talked about, Latinos being a very fast growing part of the middle class and the like. So you need to find ways to support people. And certainly there's lots of great organizations that start to do that and say, let me walk with you and understand this and grow your confidence in these areas. The other aspect that's very important that we're working on heavily here in El Paso is, the idea of the Uber entrepreneur is possible, but by and large, kind of a myth. You have to really find other people to do this with, right? Because it's, as it was pointed out earlier, it's super challenging, it's super difficult. The mental and emotional toll that entrepreneurship takes is difficult and challenging. And a lot of particularly immigrants, and certainly in the Latino culture, you just kind of don't share that, right? You don't bring that to light. You just kind of either suppress it or you say, let me fake it till I make it and whatnot. It becomes super challenging. So, through Audaz, and by the way, Audaz stands for audacious, right? Because audacious to try to do this in this part of the country. One of our advisors in our fund, who's a successful entrepreneur, also happens to be a minister. And that's by design, because I've had the unfortunate experience of going to a founder's funeral, right? Where the toll of entrepreneurship was so heavy that, they didn't know how to reach out. And so for me, it's highly important to figure out how do we do that and bring that to bear in a culturally appropriate way so that people can absorb that. The other thing I'll mention is there's an important resource that I used when I was a professor. It's a YouTube, it's a TEDx talk on YouTube, and it's titled Entrepreneurial DNA. And it's by a young man named Joe Abram, who's also an immigrant from India, who was a very successful entrepreneur who said, oh, let me replicate this. I was successful. Let me just tell people how I did it. And he found that it was extremely challenging. And one of the challenges is that the entrepreneur has to be self-aware on the skill sets and what complements they need to find in a co-founder or a group to bring along, right? And so going back to our region, the Latino entrepreneurs are now learning that, hey, I don't have to be the coder, person who sells, good at accounting, talk to the banks, talk to the, sources of equity and all these other aspects. I could actually find partners and resources to help me do that. And I like to say that I could do everything and anything. I just can't do it all at once. So sequencing how you engage in your entrepreneurial journey is also super important.
What you say is so true, and it applies completely to women entrepreneurs also, everything that you have said. And one of the things that we've recommended is that the SBA develop a criteria for giving loans, private loans, and also really come up with creative ideas of loan risk mitigation programs, because banks look at very specific things and they should look at other things, especially with communities like, whether it's Latino or women or all these underrepresented communities. So I love that. We were going to discuss like a bunch of other things on mentorship, on building, sustainable support system, what's next for Texas. But this is a fabulous conversation. And I have just been told that we're going to open it up to questions from the audience. So we could talk about this for a long time. So we're going to open it up to questions. And if there is time, we'll go back.
Well, thank you all so much. I want to ask a question that Dorian Nunez, thank you, Dorian, for your several questions. I'm going to select one of your questions, which is, how have chambers of commerce been supportive in your ecosystem? And I'd like to extend that conversation to other institutions. For example, Beto, in the past, we've talked about the role of the federal government and universities. So I think it is, and Sima, from your perspective, the SBA. So curious how like large institutions, chambers, US government, big tech are supporting your ecosystem and what impact you think that's having. Beto, feel free to start.
Sure. Thank you. I'll jump in. I'll tell you a quick story. I left the military in 2002, moved back to El Paso after living away. And I said, I'm going to start a tech company. So I wrote a business plan to do a tech company. I had a little bit of background on that. And I shopped it with all the normal institutions you would, chambers of commerce, et cetera. And this is not a disparaging statement against them. It's just, it was a different time. But unequivocally, every organization said, you can do a restaurant or you could do a trucking company. We don't understand software, right? So a lot of resources in communities sort of work on the rule, not the exception, right? And it takes a while to kind of incorporate those things. I'm happy to tell you that those same organizations now have retooled over time to be more engaged with a broader panoply of entrepreneurs. In fact, the El Paso Chamber of Commerce is now run by a tech entrepreneur who's relatively young and certainly has a vision to be more engaged, and he's also cross-border, meaning that he understands the dynamics of that. Federal government here is super important. We have a large presence of federal institutions, and along those components, the federal government interacts because we have a significant military base, but we also have a number of universities that work very closely with our community. So the University of Texas at El Paso plays an important role, and it has been able to draw additional capital from the federal government that it leverages from state government and it leverages from local donors to really create opportunities for entrepreneurship in areas that are strategic to our region. For example, aerospace manufacturing or 3D manufacturing and things of that nature. And the other institutions that are important have to be sort of what I would consider the family offices of a particular community, right? You go to like the Dallas-Fort Worth area, certainly, Dell in Austin or, others in Houston or certainly here in El Paso, you usually have some family offices that have strong roots in that community. They have changes in leadership as new generations come up. And those are super strategic in understanding and leveraging what a community needs over the long term. There's an organization called the Texas family office association, right? Run out of Houston as well. And it works statewide, and it networks these family offices across different things happening in the ecosystems. Super important. I think there's about 400 or 450 members of family offices throughout the state that are all trying to understand the attributes of the state, how to look at deals together, how to collaborate, and the like. So really, there's an article, I'll find it, I'll post it, but it was published by fellow Kaufman Fellows a few years ago that looked at this wheel of support across entrepreneurship, and it included government, industry, and government defined as local versus state versus federal, and also a give back mentality is super important, an appetite for risk and sources of capital. And lastly, I'll mention an article from the 70s that came out of Austin, and it's called The Technopolis. And it was written by George Kosmeski, who used to be the dean of the College of Business at UT Austin, who was also the original founder of ATI, the Austin Technology Incubator, which became a huge, huge success. And his article talks in great detail of the importance of institutions of higher learning and the government and industry working together to really develop an ecosystem. And the reason Austin is what it is in terms of a tech ecosystem is because of George Kosmeski, the university, Sematech, and people like like that really supported it. So it goes back to the chambers of commerce because they also have a strong play in that because the local and regional businesses all interact with the chambers locally.
Wonderful. I'm curious, Sima, given your role with the SBA, and by the way, Professor Pallares, I posted the article you just mentioned about Technopolis. But Sima,
Great.
Curious, about you coming from the federal government perspective, what roles you all play in hyperlocal ecosystems?
So the SBA has offices, local offices everywhere in Texas. They provide, if you sign up there, they provide weekly mentoring, any kind of information and help you out. And as I mentioned before, we have women business centers, which anyone can go. Like, you don't have to be a woman. They're also equipped to help you access government contracting, or even how to start a business and who do I talk to, which bank do I talk to, how do I get a loan. There is a lot of, like when the PPP the happened, a lot of the small businesses didn't know that they could access because the banks were talking to their bigger clientele. So these smaller venues actually help people. The Chamber of Commerce's work somewhat in that some of them are actually women business centers. The Latina Chamber of Commerce in Houston, I think, is the biggest one that we have in Texas. And they're very active in helping businesses also. I think part of the thing is that there are so much resources that the federal government provides. It's a matter of how to make sure people know about it in all the different communities and how to have access to it and trust the information that they're getting. And that's why we're really pushing for micro-targeting. My own experience, when we came here, my dad started a real estate business. Like, he did not ask help from anyone because he thought, first of all, I shouldn't ask anybody. And if I need help, it doesn't look good. I don't look strong. I don't know, whatever. And then the same way with my husband, we started a blinds manufacturing company. It was all like, let's do it all. Do we even ask people? How do we ask people? We shouldn't ask people. So it's a matter of making sure what we try to do is that there is ample services with the federal government. They do the outreach. We put out seminars, we put out webinars, but there is so much information. It's not centralized. So what we're trying to make sure is that because the state of Texas has a lot of resources, our locality has a lot of resources, but it's just so much information that I think for someone starting from scratch, it's a matter of, oh my God, where do I go? That's why one of our main recommendations this year is to make sure that we provide entrepreneurial education from K to 12 and in universities, so people know that, what's out there. Being an entrepreneur doesn't need to be scary. I could talk a lot more, but this is basically the gist of that. And we have a lot of resources also on our website. So please go on nwbc.gov.
Wonderful. Thank you. And Arjita, any insights on government or public sector support that you have observed or would like to see?
Actually, this has been so fascinating for me to learn as well, but I'll tell you a little bit of my personal experience when I was raising funding and I was raising VC funding because I did not know government funding was even available. So there was no idea that I had around what, how you can raise money. So the only way I thought was angel investors or VCs. But the thing that I did wrong at that time was the fact that I thought money is going to solve all my problems. And I think that's what most entrepreneurs think as well. And I do not understand the math behind how much of my company I was giving up, how much of equity I was giving up, how much of power I was giving up for the amount of check that seemed really big at this time, but over a period of time, it wouldn't matter. And I think this is what I feel all the government funding and the sponsorships and the corporate funding can come in and support the entrepreneur. But along with that, if there is education around financial intelligence as an entrepreneur and understanding that don't come from scarcity. On that negotiation table, you are an equal. You are building the company that's going to make money. The other person's giving you money to run that company. So the person who has money somehow is not all the person with all the power. We need to change that dynamic a little bit and teach entrepreneurs that first, other options are existing. Second, be careful with your equity. I've seen entrepreneurs come in and give up so much of their company in their first early rounds because they just did not understand what a convertible note was, what a safe was, how much of loan, what interest they were giving up, how much money they had to return. So I would love to see, and if there are, then I would love to know, because for me, I became an angel investor myself to start learning about these nuances and this understanding. And I've been investing in companies since 2017, but it has taught me a lot about the financial intelligence and the financial patience you need to have as an entrepreneur.
That is such a wonderful point about that learning curve of how to take on investment and looking at non-dilutive sources of capital, which the government can, in many cases, provide. We have a couple minutes left, so I want to end with a question again from Dorian, which is, what can Louisiana learn from Texas? Extending that to other states, what can Louisiana, perhaps specifically, but also other states, learn from Texas? What's going right in your region that you think other states should adopt?
Yeah, I'll start and say that years ago, we would have very well-intentioned folks that would visit with the idea that they could help replicate Silicon Valley in the Silicon Frontera. And I think after a while, we realized that we have to understand the endowment of our particular region and play it as our strength and build what makes sense there. And therefore, you'll be able to isolate what are the right resources you need. And what other states can learn is to understand that, different cities or ecosystems or regions within the same state don't need to look like each other in every aspect. They have strengths that they can be leveraged. Austin is different from El Paso, from Houston, from Dallas, and you name it. They're very unique places. And if you allow those places to thrive in their areas of expertise and develop competitive advantages, then they will then be able to metaphorically trade with each other in those things that they're really good at, versus developing subpar ecosystems that kind of look the same but don't reach competitive scale, if you will. So that to me would be, one of the big lessons to learn.
I also think combination of private-public partnership is really important. Houston does a really good job. I know other places do also. It's encouraging that kind of a partnership in areas that there are gaps really, really make a difference. So we strongly support that kind of a thing. And we also recommend it on the federal government side.
Very much so.
Arjita, anything to add on what other states can learn from Texas, especially since you're a relatively new Texan?
I am here to learn. I think in 5 years, I'll be able to answer that question, or 10 years. I need my 10,000 hours in.
Yes. Any final comments you all would like to make and leave with our audience? Or request?
I'm just really excited that Texas is one of the top people on your research, and it gives me hope. I think we need to do more sharing of best practices. So this is a great conversation for, Austin, El Paso, and Houston to continue and see how we can use that. But your research is very helpful. So I just wanted to commend you for what you're doing and supporting the various ecosystem and making sure that there is equity in this environment.
Thank you.
I echo that sentiment.
Same here. It just made my move really valid from San Francisco. I'm like, this is fine, great. I moved here. So, and thank you for having us. Thank you, Sima and Beto. I learned so much from the amazing experience and journeys you've had. I'm definitely connecting with both of you. We need to talk further.
Well, this is great. Thank you all. And I will say the Venture Equity Project is continuing. A theme that I've heard a lot of from each of our speakers is this micro-targeting of local communities, what's happening in cities. And Beto, as you said, like competitiveness comes from distinctive traits. Let El Paso be El Paso, let Austin be Austin. And in this coming year, our Venture Equity Project will be focused on cities. So last year we focused on states. We really took a broad view of ecosystems across the US. This year we're going to be hyper-focused on cities and what are the distinct characteristics of various cities that make them successful, what can be learned from other places, and what might we encourage cities to really lean into their own strengths. So if you would like to discuss our research or anything else, please get in touch with me. My email is in the chat. And I want to thank again so much Sima, Beto, and Arjita for being with all of us this morning. Really, thank you for this wonderful conversation.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thanks, Jessica.
Fair.
Yes. Thanks, Anna.